Today at 6, it's been another rewarding day for Team GB at the Olympic Games in Japan.
Right on the line, Great Britain win the medal race, and with it, the gold medal.
There were 2 golds and a silver in sailing, and Britain is now in 6th position overall in the medal table.
Jason Kenny straining every sinew in pursuit of that medal.
And in cycling, Jason Kenny won his 8th medal to match the all-time record for British Olympians.
You do your first Olympics and I think you catch up in the momentum, and then to repeat it and then having to do it again and again, it does get hard, to be fair.
And a remarkable comeback for the best US gymnast of all time. Simone Biles takes bronze despite her struggle with mental health. We'll have all the day's news from Tokyo with just 5 days of competition left. Also today, in Scotland, the First Minister confirms that almost all remaining COVID restrictions will end from next Monday. The Olympic sprinter from Belarus tells the BBC why she's scared to return home and the fears for her family's safety. And we talk to Britain's youngest ever summer Olympian on the eve of her quest for gold.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, a stunning silver for Keely Hodgkinson. The 800-metre runner breaks a long-standing British record in Team GB's first medal on the track.
Good evening, and we start with yet another outstanding day for Team GB at the Olympic Games in Japan. Sailing brought in 2 gold medals and a silver. The cyclists settled for silver in both the women's team pursuit and the men's team sprint. But that outcome means that Jason Kenny has now matched the record of the great Sir Bradley Wiggins as the most decorated British Olympian of all time. There were other medal-winning performances during the day. Our correspondent Natalie Perks has the latest from Tokyo.
Nautical perfection, sailing dominance. Britain were riding a crest of a wave. Dylan Fletcher and Stuart Bithell were in a great place in the men's 49er and just needed to beat the Germans in their final race. They literally put it all on the line.
Right on the line, Great Britain with it, the gold medal in Tokyo 2020.
But not to be outdone, Giles Scott was going in the Finn class, where Britain is superb. They've won gold at the last 5 games. But with just seconds remaining, Scott was cutting it fine.
And Giles Scott holds on to the gold medal in the dying moments of that race.
Talk about skin of your teeth. A quick plunge to celebrate, as back home there was delight.
She never ever watches his racing, and so for her to put herself through that is awesome. So we can only just say thank you, Giles, for delivering in the end. Although, as he said to us, at least you didn't have a heart attack.
And silver in the NACRA 17 topped off a wonderful day for Britain's sailors.
Well, 3 Britons in this final.
It had been 41 years since that last happened, but here were Gemma Ruki, Alex Bell and Keely Hodgkinson right in the mix.
And it's Great Britain, 2nd and 3rd. Hodgkinson now striding towards silver. Uthing-Moe away and clear to the gold medal. She's going to take it. And Hodgkinson, Ricky's under pressure for the bronze. Hodgkinson the silver.
At just 19, Hodgkinson's potent kick finish had propelled her onto the podium.
Well, that's Britain off the mark with their first medal in the Athletic Stadium, and that silver is Britain's first medal in this event since 2004.
And once the flag was round her shoulders, thoughts turned to those watching back home.
They put so much belief in me, because I did it.
What does this silver medal mean to you, Keely?
This, because I don't cry. My friends will be like, what's she crying for?
Dame Kelly Holmes was the last Briton to no success in this race. Her national record had stood for 26 years, till now.
I think there'll be young girls looking up at them now, and in years to come we'll see their legacy. But I'm just pleased to have played a part in the fact that I hope that I've inspired these 3 in particular, but anyone else, to do what I feel that they can do. And records are there to be broken.
From one track to another, Britain had won gold in the men's team sprint at the last 3 games, but for Jason Kenny, Jack Carlin and Ryan Owens, today it wasn't meant to be.
Gold for the Netherlands.
That silver, though, Kenny's 8th Olympic medal, still saw him enter the record books, tied with Sir Bradley Wiggins as Britain's most decorated Olympian. Not to be outdone, wife Laura took silver behind a dominant Germany in the team pursuit, alongside Katie Archibald, Nia Evans and Josie Knight, her 5th Olympic honour. That family trophy cabinet must be groaning under the weight of those medals, and there could yet be more. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Tokyo.
Simone Biles, the most decorated US gymnast of all time, says she's very proud of herself after winning bronze in the beam final. It's seen as a hugely impressive comeback for the 24-year-old, who's not taken part in many events during the Tokyo Games because she was dealing with mental health issues. Our sports editor Dan Rowan sent this report.
Here she is, Simone Biles, you can hear
It was the welcome back Tokyo had been waiting for. Simone Biles returning to competition earlier, a week after the world's greatest gymnast stunned the sport by pulling out of the team finals to focus on her mental health.
She's broken boundaries in every level.
Having sat out 4 other events, her Olympics looked to be over. But today, on the balance beam, a final chance to remind these games what they'd been missing.
Beautiful triple spin, she moves with such speed.
Biles said she'd suffered from what gymnasts call the twisties, a mental block in which they lose their sense of orientation. But having amended her routine, the US superstar held her nerve.
Needs now this great dismount. So here, we'll flip to 1, flip to 2, double pike, just like a jump off.
And so Simone Biles is back. Her series of withdrawals and now subsequent return here this evening is arguably the story of these games. One that has been a landmark moment when it comes to raising awareness of the pressures that athletes are under, even the greatest athletes, regardless of whether or not she wins a medal tonight.
The smile had said it all, the sense of relief obvious. It had been enough to put her into silver position.
Going for gold.
Chinese sensation 16-year-old Guan Chen top scored, pushing Biles back into bronze. But this felt like a victory after one of the toughest weeks of her career.
I was so nervous, but it just means the world that I can come out here and compete one more time before this Games is over. On the other ones, I physically couldn't twist in the air. I would just keep crashing, and I just wasn't cleared safely to do those things. Mine's not there.
As well as praise, Biles had faced some criticism for deciding not to compete after losing her bearings during this vault last week. But one of her former teammates says her impact goes well beyond her 7th Olympic medal.
She is someone that has transcended gymnastics, made it mainstream. She's allowed people to engage and follow it. And I think that her legacy will live beyond sports with what she's done this weekend. So, I mean, it's made a bigger impact than if she would have won all 5 medals.
These games, perhaps her last, did not turn out as Biles had expected. But her 7th Olympic medal may prove to be the one she's most proud of. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Tokyo.
Now, the athlete Karsten Warholm of Norway had a stunning day. He won gold in the 400 metres hurdles and in the process destroyed his previous world record. He said after the race that it hadn't sunk in yet, but he still felt rather ecstatic. With more on that and some of the day's other achievements, here's our correspondent Andy Swiss.
I cannot believe what we've just seen. Not so much rewriting the record books as ripping them to pieces. The Olympics have seen some remarkable feats over the years, but nothing like Karsten Warholm's. The Norwegian was favourite to win the 400 metres hurdles, but something extraordinary was happening. World records are supposed to get beaten by fractions. This was on a different planet.
Warholm is going to go away to take the win. It's gold for Norway. 45.94.
A shirt-shredding, jaw-dropping moment. He'd smashed his old record by the best part of a second. And if the world was in wonder, well, so was he.
I can't believe the time. A lot of time I've been asked about the perfect race. I said it didn't exist. But this is the closest thing I've ever come.
Commentators, meanwhile, were left reaching for the superlatives.
That performance by Karsten Warholm is possibly the best I've ever seen.
For many, Usain Bolt's blistering 100 metres record of 9.58 had been the pinnacle of athletics, but now that famous landmark has a rival.
We always felt there was a potentially an opportunity for Usain to go a little bit quicker. This world record, I just think, has just been taken so far out of the norm, the normal realms, and that's why I think it's so incredible.
But he wasn't the only history maker, as the women's 100 metres champion Elaine Thompson-Herah took the 200 metres.
She's beginning to come away, she's going to make it a double.
It's the second games in a row she's won both sprints, the Jamaican becoming the first woman to clinch the so-called double-double. And there was more success for Britain. In the boxing, Pat McCormack had to settle for silver after losing his welterweight final. While in the diving, there was a bronze for Jack Law. Law later revealed he'd considered retiring earlier this year because of mental health issues. This, he said, was redemption. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Let's take a quick look at the medal table now after 11 days of competition in Tokyo. After all those medals today in sailing and cycling, boxing, diving and on the track, Team GB are currently in 6th place with a total of 43 medals. So let's turn to some of the day's other main news and we'll start with the latest on the pandemic. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has confirmed that most of the country's remaining restrictions will be lifted from next Monday. Our Scotland correspondent Alexandra Mackenzie joins us now from Glasgow. Alexandra, just take us through some of the detail of the announcement today.
Well, from Monday, Scotland is going to move beyond the level system and there's going to be a further easing of restrictions. Social distancing is going to pretty much go. That will be in places like pubs and restaurants. And here in Scotland, nightclubs are going to open for the first time since before the pandemic. Also, if you need to self-isolate because you've been in contact with someone who has coronavirus, you only need to do that until you get a negative PCR test, so long as you've been double vaccinated. But if you're aged between 5 and 17, you still need that negative PCR test before you come out of isolation, but you don't need to have been vaccinated. Face coverings will be with us for some time to come. They're still going to remain mandatory in indoor public places. That's places like shops and also on public transport. Schools in Scotland go back in the next couple of weeks. If there's one person in a classroom who has coronavirus, the whole class no longer needs to self-isolate, just close contacts. But some regulations will stay in place. That's social distancing between teachers and pupils. And also older pupils will still have to wear face coverings for at least the first 6 weeks of term. Now, Nicola Sturgeon has said there is no guarantee that there won't be more restrictions in place in future.
Alexandra, many thanks for the update there. Alexandra Mackenzie, our correspondent in Scotland. So, as the Scottish Government confirms the lifting of most restrictions on August the 9th, the latest UK Government data on the pandemic shows that there were 21,691 new cases of coronavirus in the latest 24-hour period. Now, that is the 5th day in a row that the numbers have fallen and hospitalisations have also decreased. So does that mean that the trend is now very firmly downwards and that more optimism is now justified? Our health editor Huw Pym has been taking a look at the figures and what they mean. There is some flash photography coming up.
Remember this? Nightclubs opening up in England on July the 19th, along with the ending of remaining legal restrictions. Scientists had predicted this would fuel the spread of the virus with more cases, but it hasn't happened. In fact, they've gone the other way. Now, one of the experts who expected case increases says it's come as a surprise.
All the indications now are that there was a real reduction in cases, particularly in adults between 20 and 40 years old. COVID's had a habit of surprising us, and this is a good surprise for a change. I'd like to understand it better, that's for sure.
Daily reported cases did go above 50,000 in mid-July, though not as high as the January peak, and have fallen back to around 26,000 on the 7-day rolling average. The decline in cases actually started soon after the opening up in England on July the 19th. Health officials acknowledge gatherings of people to watch the Euros football caused some spikes in infections, which might have pushed up case rates more than expected before July the 19th. Since then, it seems, even with new freedoms, people remained cautious, for example with mask wearing, and that was a factor in curbing the spread of the virus.
We have perhaps assumed that people would go slightly more back to normal than they actually have. And I think probably what's happening is that a lot of people are being a little bit more cautious in terms of returning to normal, which is why what we're seeing is probably on the slightly lower end of some of the modelling forecasts.
So what does all this mean for the NHS? There were fears that hospitals would come under intensifying pressure this month as infections continued rising. Here's what's been happening with daily COVID hospital admissions. They started rising quite sharply in late June and right through July, though they do appear recently to have levelled off a bit and are not accelerating at the rate which some experts had predicted. The vaccination rollout has played a major part. Nearly 89% of adults have now had a first dose and 73% have had both jabs. There was a reminder of the tragic COVID toll today, with more than 100 deaths reported, reflecting cases first identified a few weeks ago. But there's a growing consensus that there won't be another surge as a result of the opening up in England last month. Huw Edwards, BBC News.
Now the time is 16 minutes past 6 and our main story this evening. It's been another rewarding day for Team GB with 2 golds and a silver in sailing. Britain now 6th overall in the Olympic medal table. And still to come, we'll be live in Felixstowe where the container ship that blocked the Suez Canal has finally reached port today.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News channel, high drama on the waves. Britain win 2 golds in sailing and it's celebrations all around as it goes right down to the wire in the men's 49er class.
Now, the number of drug-related deaths in England and Wales has reached the highest level since records began nearly 30 years ago. There were over 4,500 deaths linked to drug abuse registered in 2020, according to the Office for National Statistics. But delays in registration caused by the pandemic mean that around half the deaths happened in 2019. Record figures for Scotland were published last week. Now, the latest figures for England and Wales represent a 3.8% increase on the previous year. The trade in illegal drugs has increasingly been blamed for rising levels of violence in many towns and cities across Britain. And in the seaside community of Rhyl in North Wales, research by BBC News shows that violent crime increased for 4 years before the pandemic struck, with drug gangs playing a significant part in that, as our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan now reports.
They caught 3 people injecting there the other day.
Weekend patrol in the most violent neighbourhood in Wales.
He said he was going to pinch me. I did not step forward.
Right, look, we're not going anywhere now.
As COVID restrictions ease, there's fear here as elsewhere that serious crime will increase. Violent crime for a long time in Rhyl was linked to the nighttime economy. Assaults and beatings and stabbings, a consequence of drinking too much, often at the weekend. But in recent years, the nature of violence here has changed dramatically. The town is plagued by so-called county lines, gangs from big cities importing violence as they battle for control of the drugs market.
When we get rid of one county line, then another will pop up.
This car chase ended with feuding criminals murdering a local man, the drugs trade killing both users and dealers.
These are vulnerable people, they exploit them. They look to get them hooked on drugs, and when they can't pay for them, they look to encourage them to commit violence themselves or to deal on their behalf.
I hear it all the time around Rhyl. Drug selling, sometimes stabbings.
In Ryl's poorest neighbourhood, this club offers an alternative.
Good, Maggie.
Self-defence, discipline, and perhaps most importantly, resilience.
We try and get the youngsters off the street. We stop them having peer pressure. We give them confidence so they can say no to drugs and things like that. And we try and teach them to be respectful and disciplined.
The impact of addiction exacerbates other toxic behaviours too.
You are not alone. We are here to guide you out of the dark.
Betty Harper felt compelled to write this song by the domestic abuse she witnessed.
Blood is thicker than alcohol.
Her mother Natasha had a violent relationship with a former partner.
There was beatings, theft of jewellery to sell for drink, lots of emotional abuse, broken bones, cuts. He was standing over me with a chair, and I knew that if I couldn't get away, he would have killed me.
You've wiped tears from your cheeks.
Local charities say referrals for domestic abuse have increased by 40% during the pandemic. It's a major driver of violence in Rhyl.
I'd do anything to look after my family, and so I kind of took on the role of the protector. When I see something like that, and that's something that I cannot control, the next best thing is to turn to music, to write a song to help.
The song helped Betty Harper win a recording contract as ministers turned to tackling crime as part of their efforts to regenerate towns like Rhyl. They too will have to turn negative experiences into positive outcomes. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Rhyl.
And still in North Wales, a man has appeared at Llandudno Magistrates Court accused of murdering his teenage sister. Matthew Selby, who's 19 and from Ashton-under-Lyne, is accused of killing 15-year-old Amanda Selby at the Tŷ Mawr caravan park in Tywyn on Saturday. He was remanded in custody and will appear at Mold Crown Court tomorrow. Now, Kristina Timanovskaya, the sprinter from Belarus, has told the BBC that her country is not safe and she may not be able to go home for many years. She's been granted a humanitarian visa by Poland after officials from Belarus tried to send her home early from the Olympics against her will. There's growing international condemnation of the regime of President Alexander Lukashenko, who's ruled Belarus since 1994 and who stands accused of widespread human rights abuses. Our correspondent Sarah Rainsford sent this report from Minsk, which is the capital of Belarus.
She's a young athlete thrust into a political row she never sought. When sprinter Kristina Timanovskaya publicly criticised her coaches at the Olympics, they tried to force her back to Belarus. She refused. Speaking to the BBC from Tokyo, she said she was now scared for herself and for her family.
I can't go back to Belarus now, of course. It's definitely not safe for me. I have no idea when I can go back. It may be 5 or 10 years.
And today came another reminder of the danger for dissidents. In Kiev, a young Belarusian activist was found hanging in a park, but his friends don't believe it was suicide. Vitaly Shishov fled to Ukraine last year to avoid arrest. He'd been helping a flood of other opposition supporters who followed. The opposition leader, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, is in forced exile herself.
Well, we're very, very pleased. I'm very pleased.
She was in London today, part of a tour seeking international support. She wants more pressure, more sanctions against Alexander Lukashenko, the man she tried to topple as president. Since then, the mood in Minsk has changed dramatically. Alexander Lukashenko now firmly back in control. A year ago, this entire square and all the streets around it were crammed full of protesters. It was opposition to President Alexander Lukashenko on a scale like he'd never seen before. But now there's no public sign at all of that challenge, because so many people have been arrested since then that the others have been scared into silence. Maria Kolesnikova was one of the faces of the protests, touring the country, rallying mass crowds. Tomorrow she goes on trial for attempting to overthrow the authorities. Her father hasn't been allowed to see her since her arrest.
She told me whatever sentence I get, I'm ready for that.
She writes to me all the time that we'll meet again soon. Everything will be okay.
But Belarus today feels anything but okay. Even our meeting is being monitored from the shadows. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Minsk.
The UN says at least 40 Afghan civilians have been killed in intense fighting in the past 24 hours as the Taliban and government forces battle for control of Helmand's provincial capital. It said thousands of people in Lashkargah have been displaced. The UN also highlighted concerns about people's homes being occupied by fighters. Wildfires raging in southern parts of Turkey are continuing to burn out of control. Firefighters are struggling to deal with several blazes in coastal resorts like Marmaris, where helicopters have been used to drop water on flames burning through trees and undergrowth. Now, the huge container ship that disrupted global trade when it got stuck across the Suez Canal in March has now arrived at the port of Felixstowe in Suffolk. The Ever Given, which is owned by the Evergreen Corporation, finally set sail last month after Egypt signed a compensation deal with its owners and its insurers. Now, our correspondent Theo Leggett is in Felixstowe for us. We know all about all the headlines, Theo, of course, and the story, but what lessons have been learnt, do you think?
Well, I think, Huw, what we've learnt from this is just how vulnerable the complex global supply chains that businesses and consumers rely on for the products we use every day really are vulnerable to sudden, unexpected disruption. This was just one ship, a very big one as you can see, but just one ship, which became stranded across one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world and delayed hundreds of vessels. The knock-on effects of that lasted for weeks, if not months. Freight rates, the amount that businesses pay to bring goods in from China, shot up, and they haven't gone down since because of other problems like COVID outbreaks in China. And that means, at the moment, businesses are trying to stock up for the busy Christmas period. They're wondering what rates they're going to pay and whether they'll be able to get the goods at all. What that means for you and me is that our Christmas shopping may cost us a lot more and we may have a lot less choice. And this vessel is a very powerful symbol, I should say, of all that disruption.
Theo, many thanks again. Theo Leggett with the latest there in Felixstowe. Now, before we go, some more Olympic news, because tomorrow morning, Team GB's youngest ever summer Olympian will be competing. The skateboarder Sky Brown turned 13 last month. She divides her time between Japan and the US with her Japanese mum and her British dad. Last year, she suffered skull fractures and broken limbs in a skateboarding accident, but she's made a remarkable recovery, as Natalie Perks tells us.
Colour trees, your yellow leaves move me. We first met a long time ago and we talked about this dream, and now you're here. Yeah. What does it feel like?
It's insane. It's unbelievable. It's so cool to be here. And at the village, there's like all different kinds of people, like super tall people and like super strong people.
Was there a moment where you thought the Olympics isn't going to happen?
I thought maybe it wouldn't happen. I was like crushed. I was a little bummed, but people's lives are more important, so I thought about that and got through it.
You and I last spoke after a really serious accident that you'd had.
Yeah, that was definitely a heavy time for, my parents, my family, and it was bad, but I really think the accident made me want to go harder and, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
And so how important is it for you to have your dad here with you?
Oh, it's really nice, I'm still pretty young, and it's nice to have someone here to look after me, and it'll be hard without my dad.
You are going to make history for Britain. Has that sank in? What does that mean to you?
It was my dream to be one of the youngest in there and, show girls that it doesn't matter how old or young you are, you can do anything,
We've seen you win some big events in the last year since we last saw you. How much confidence has that given you?
I'm feeling good and I can't wait. I'm going to really try to get on the podium, get a medal, get a gold hopefully. But no matter what happens, I just want to inspire girls around the world, and hopefully they will see, this little girl here and oh, if she can do it, I can do it too. That's my goal. That's why I want to be in the Olympics.
We'll all be rooting for Sky tomorrow, so good luck to her. It's time to have a look at the weather. It's Nick today. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Hugh, and it's been very pleasant out there across many areas today. Temperatures in what you might call the summer comfort zone, up to around 22 degrees Celsius. But yet again today, there have been a few heavy downpours developing. This one was photographed in Kent. Some of the heaviest at the moment in East Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, the East Midlands, a scattering of showers in Scotland as well. They are slowly going to fade getting into tonight, though northwest Scotland keeping some outbreaks of rain. And this is one part of the UK that's been very dry so far this summer. Not quite as cool as it was last night, but away from the town city centres, just dipping down into single figures. A few mist and fog patches around, quickly clearing in the morning. And for many of us, it'll be a sunny start to the day. Showers still around in northwest Scotland, a few popping up elsewhere in Scotland, mainly north of the central belt. They'll drift east across Northern Ireland during the day, and they'll flare up again across England and Wales. Some heavy and thundery downpours are possible, but many places will avoid them, stay dry and have those pleasantly warm sunny spells up to 23 tomorrow. What downpours that do develop will gradually ease as we get into the night. And then Thursday onwards, our weather all about this area of low pressure. It's going to take a full 4 days to come into the UK and then clear away. And that does include the weekend. So windier weather with that, and the downpours becoming more widespread again. This is how Thursday is looking. Initially turning wetter in the west, but the showers will gradually push further east during the day. Still feeling quite warm if you get to see some sunshine, though temperatures will come down a bit going into the weekend. And for Friday, some of the downpours will be heavy and thundery with a risk of flooding. Showers continue into the weekend. At the start of next week, it will try to settle down again. Well, for a few days anyway. Hugh.
Nick, many thanks again. Nick Miller there for us. That's all from BBC News at 6. I'll be back at 10. Now on BBC One, we join our news teams where you are. Bye for now.